Hello everybody, we are back on Gelvin Valley for Farming Simulator 15. It's a wonderful map created by Wild Wild West. We are in the middle of planting, trying to get all of our fields reseeded for another crop. Whoops, I'm probably climbing too far up that hill. Oh well. Because I think if I remember correctly, yeah, that's kind of a steep. I need to plant that with grass and be done with it. So I don't think we'd be having a real life field there. So I'm planting rape in this field. Woo! Oh my, this pushes the tractor around. I think I'm just a bit underpowered for this planter. But that's alright. We're going to make it work. So yeah, putting rape in here, I just put a little barley in, trying to get something that's worth a bit more than the wheat that I had all last harvest. And maybe in this next harvest, I need to get a bigger header for the combine too. Maybe if I rent it, it won't even cost all that much. Something to try to get through it quicker than I did this last time. I enjoy it, but maybe dragging all of you through it isn't the most enjoyable thing to do. So maybe I need to be doing more off-cam than what I've been doing with this. Be that as it may, we are replanting, and I almost think I have it on quick growth at the moment, so I look at the time here, it's 1:23 in the afternoon. You know, I should be able to get all this done. I think I could have the whole farm done easily by the end of the day. Might even be able to fertilize it before tomorrow. That'd kind of be a thought. And being on quick growth mode, I'm pretty sure that in 24 hours, you know, once time is advanced, that it would literally be ready to harvest. So, which is handy. When you're poor like I am, looking at my negative 11,000 number up there, because I'm getting charged to plant this. When you're poor like I am, it helps to have a harvest. You know what? My OCD is not going to allow that to happen. Yeah. There we go. I'm going to get that little nubbin. Got him. Oops. When you're poor, it helps to have frequent harvests. If only we could do that in real life, huh? Have twice as many harvests as planting. Well, my last episode, I talked about probably what, if there's anybody still watching this after, unless I scared everybody off, I talked about kind of a different topic. Maybe some even consider it morbid, I don't know. It's kind of been on my mind here lately. I can't hardly help it, you know, with a couple folks dying and whatnot. And there was another lady. You guys are gonna think I'm making this up after a while. Another young lady who goes to our church. She was in a car wreck today, head-on collision, I understand, with a semi-truck. Must have been on the interstate, although I'm not sure about that detail. Interstate being the four-lane highways, you know, where there's no stop sign, or maybe six-lane. I'm not sure where all this happened. But I guess the guy crossed over the median and just rammed her head on in her car. And the only details I have on him is that he apparently had a seizure. So, you know, I guess he can't help that. You know, if anybody's driving, I had a daughter who had seizures when she was a little chirp, and there was nothing that, you know, a person that's seizing, they can't do anything. I mean, they're basically helpless. At least that's from my observation of her. So this truck driver, you know, going into a seizure while they're driving, that's pretty serious. So it makes sense that the truck would crash into somebody or would have rear-ended somebody. But Fortunately for her, as I understand it, it broke her femur. That's the top bone in the leg, I think. Did some damage on her pelvis. There's metal in her body, parts from the car, or whatever. Not sure what all, but those are the details that I've heard. So she's in the hospital right now. I guess she'll be on crutches for a while and off work. But at least she isn't dead. And fortunately, it didn't impact her head. So, a very fortunate young lady. When I say young, I think she's in her 20s. I'm not really sure what her age is. Single lady yet. Don't know where she was going. Don't know where the truck was going. But just one of those things that happens, and you don't wake up in the morning intending something like that to happen and say, "Oh, today I'm going to crash." It's just one of those things that sometimes gets handed to you. So it seems like these kinds of things won't quit. And like I say, it's been a bad couple weeks, but I'm thankful she's still alive, and she's banged up pretty good. Some of this might even be permanent. I don't know. I think that she has a couple screws, in the bones that were broken. I don't know if after she heals, if there will always be a limp or any of that. But like I say, at least she's alive. So that's at least something positive. Maybe last time my musing on ghost stories and that kind of thing, maybe that gets too close to being morbid. I don't know. I know one episode in here I talked about farm type accidents, and I think someone commented on that it felt a little bit morbid, even though it's a reality, a lot of these things. So this time, I don't know. I always wonder what to talk about in these. This time I wondered if we could spend a little time on something lighter, not quite as heavy. I'd be interested to know. Oops, I don't know why I did that for. What are some good pranks that you have pulled in your life to where it's given people a smile, a laugh, or you've tweaked someone, maybe it's given you a laugh. I don't know if they have laughed. And I'm an accountant, so maybe my sense of humor is a bit dry for some. I would say accountants, we do pranks. On one of my videos here the other day, I don't remember who left this in their comment, but they know that I'm an accountant, so they told me an accountant joke, and I think I've heard it before. They say, what's the difference between an outgoing accountant and he was a shy accountant, an introverted accountant? I don't know. And the difference apparently was the outgoing accountant will stare at the other person's shoes while he's talking to him. Yeah, which is just kind of basically saying accountants, we're all a bunch of nerds and we don't relate very well to people. And you know what? The stereotypes a lot of times are true. For a lot of accountants, that is exactly how they are. They're kind of married to their calculator, and they kind of live in their own world or whatever. I'd like to believe that isn't me, but I don't know. Embrace the nerd. I think a part of me is kind of that way, and I will readily admit I'm introverted, and the idea of a lot of meeting new people, small talk, going around a room and working the room. I mean, the idea of that just doesn't appeal to me, shall we say. But I don't mind talking to people, and I guess part of my reason for these videos is to learn how to talk better. And y'all know I already have a crummy voice. I can't do much to fix that, but I can work on the other. And maybe it's easier because, I'm just talking to my screen while relaxing, playing this game that I enjoy. And I don't see anybody out there, so it's just me talking, so maybe that makes it easy. But as I've gotten older, I'm learning there are variations on this. To be introverted doesn't necessarily mean that you're shy or that you absolutely don't want to talk to people. A lot of times, what it means is you need quiet time to recharge your batteries, and because social events exhaust you. Whereas for a person who's outgoing, it's those social events where they get recharged. That's how they charge their batteries. And when things are quiet or if they're by themselves, that is what is hard on the extrovert. Anyway, that's some of the things you hear. What do I know? That just kind of I hear things like this, and sometimes like, oh yeah, that resonates. That's kind of how I am. Anyway, enough of all that. Who cares, right? I was asking about pranks, so I got started thinking about what kind of pranks have I pulled. I know there's one I shared kind of in my Lone Oak series. I don't remember which episode. I don't even know if it's on the air yet. It will be at some point, that I did to my cousin. Why am I stuttering here? Maybe it's just a weak computer. So I won't explain that one here. It involved my cousin, and I think it was a pretty good one. It involved my cousin and tricking him on the Miss America pageant, just kind of teasing him a bit. But you all can go over there to that series to hear that one. But in a work context, I used to work for one of the large international accounting firms. I go the right way. Here we go. Yeah, go round and round and round. I don't know if I'm going the right way. Used to work for a large international accounting firm, um, where they deal with massive clients. There's a lot of people. There were several hundred people there. It's a wonderful training ground, to get experience. Before I was there, I think 4 years before I came to work with my father at a much smaller firm, which I've grown to prefer, over the years. If for no other reason than it's just closer to my home versus I don't have to drive clear up there into Crazy Town to do it. But there was a lot of people, and there'd be just a lot of funny stuff, that would happen over time. All the way from simple things like, you know, I worked in their audit department, so it was very common that you would have a team of people. We would go out and we would audit a company on the client's premises, and there'd be maybe 3, 4 of us out there. It depended on how big the job was. And so you usually would have what was called a senior accountant, and the senior accountant would have a couple experienced staff out there with them, and then there'd be a junior employee, like someone brand new that needed experience. You had to have some experience out there to get the job done right, but you also had to have some new people so they could start gaining experience and learning how. I mean, that's just on the job training 101. Well, as you get through the job, and sometimes you could be out there a week or two, depending on what all was involved. There's always a system of one person performs the work, another person reviews it to make sure it's right. If it isn't correct, it gets sent back for comments, corrections, that kind of thing. And once this goes through, once the auditing work is done, a report gets generated, and at some point in there, another person from the firm comes out, typically like a manager type, who's responsible for even more jobs and isn't in on the day-to-day doing it, if you will, but will come out to kind of review some of the work, help with it. And if it was a particularly large job, even the partner, at the owner of the firm, one of the owners would come out. Well, so one of these managers was kind of a trickster, and he came out one time, and apparently he had a number of comments, and all of a sudden, while he's out there, and we're generally quiet, when we're doing our work, he all of a sudden doubles over where he's sitting and just starts yelling in pain or whatever. And so the other people in the room are saying, "Oh my goodness, what's wrong? Are you okay?" and he said something about his back hurting or whatever, and your back is hurting. Well, why is your back hurting? What did you do to it? And he just deadpans. He says, it hurts from carrying you guys. I know that sounds corny, cheesy, and dumb, but it's something I remember hearing. I wasn't there to see it myself. Um, and maybe some of you'd hear that and say, oh, that's so stupid. That's what accountants joke about. Well, brother, let me tell you, if you know the kind of job work that we do, you'll take humor wherever you can find it. Um, I am thinking of some of the pranks I did. Um, Generally, it wasn't advisable to do pranks in the work product that we had. A lot of these companies that we were auditing, these were companies that appeared on the stock exchange. And auditing really is a serious business where people depend on the auditor to do the job right, to give an opinion, so that they know the facts and narrative that's in the reports that they're reading are accurate and reliable. And so to pull a prank in our work papers about the client or that kind of thing, we tended to avoid that. But I know one time I couldn't resist. I put something in a file and I dummied up. It wasn't the file, it was a permanent file, and it was obviously a bogus record. We interview, when we do an audit, we interview a lot of people for various things, mainly to learn about the business, just all sorts of inquiries. And so maybe I got sick of inquiries, I don't know. I dummied up an inquiry that I did supposedly off of a hairnet. I took, any time we visited a food processor, if that's a type of client we were working on, if we went into the factory to kind of get a tour, or we went into the freezer, anytime there was food around, you often had to put this ugly looking hairnet on. And we all looked totally stupid. You felt stupid putting them on. You try to carefully comb your hair in the morning, and then they make you wear these stupid nets, and it just messes everything up, and I think the women particularly hated them. And if you were a guy with a beard, you had a double pleasure. They didn't want any hairs. I think that's what they're trying to prevent, was hair getting in the food. I totally get it. But if you had a beard, not only did you have one on top of your head, you also had to have one around your mug, so that it would keep your beard hair from falling out and getting in the food, I guess. So I took one of these hair nets, I stapled it to some backing or whatever, and then I just wrote out some nonsense on there that, I had inquired of this particular hair net, I suspected him of fraud, and I don't know, I just put some stupid things in there. I signed off on it as if it was a work paper, and then threw it in the permanent file just to see if the owner of the firm would actually find it. And he did, and he left me this nice note. I guess he thought it was kind of funny, this particular instance. So again, you may not think it's funny, but like I say, when you're out working on these long hours and it's on intangible stuff, you tend to look for things to, I don't know, entertain yourself a little bit. One other prank I did up there that that was kind of fun was, let's see, we were in this skyscraper up there. We had the 38th and 39th floors. The 38th floor was a tax department. The 39th floor was the audit department. So I tended to spend most of my time on the 39th floor because, I primarily did auditing. But there was a period of 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in there, one year, where I helped out in the tax department for a little while, doing tax returns and that kind of thing. So I was on the lower floor. And I tend to be a night owl, so a lot of times, I wouldn't get there real early in the morning. I get there regular time or whatever. But a lot of times I'd be working late at night. And if it's on tax returns, that's generally a stressful time of year. Anybody that knows certified public accountants and what they do would have some understanding of just how busy we are certain times a year, when there's a tax crunch. So I'd be working up in there in the middle of the night, and I say middle of the night, it might have been 11, 12 at night when I was there, and oftentimes there'd be nobody else there. Occasionally, maybe, you'd hear a vacuum cleaner. That's when the cleaning folks would come through, the janitors. Some of them I got to know practically on a first name basis. They probably saw me in there and thought I was crazy. Um, so so I spent a lot of time there, and in those days we printed a lot of jobs, and so if you're doing a large tax return, I mean there was some I remember printing. Some jobs I sent there, it was a ream of paper. I mean it's just a huge job, so it would take some time. Well, and sometimes when that was happening, if I timed it wrong, I'd go over there and it'd still be kicking out paper. So I would just kind of wander around the office a little bit, wander around the room, whatever, while I was waiting for the print job to finish. Well, one time we had downstairs in the tax department, there was kind of our library, if you will, of past files. It's kind of where we put all the work papers to bed when we were done with them. So we had several years archived down there. And at the other end of this room, there was a copy machine, fax machine, some basic things like that. Well, one night, like I say, I was sending a print job there, and it wasn't done, so I was just kind of looking around the room. And so there was a bulletin board over on the wall, and with various things on it. Don't remember, doesn't matter. Fax machine there, and all of a sudden something clicked in my mind because both floors have a fax machine, and the fax number for this one I think was printed right on it. So, just being an idiot accountant, I guess, I took a random piece of paper off of the bulletin board announcing some such and other, and I put it on the fax machine and I faxed it to upstairs. And I just did that one page. It went through, and that was that. I think my job was done printing, and so I didn't think really anything of it. Well, kind of through the busy season, I ended up doing this several times. And all of a sudden, and you'd have to know the librarian lady that we had down there. There was a lady that maintained that room. She was in charge of the machines. She was in charge of the archives, the bulletin board. That whole room was her area. And she was someone I guess I would say had kind of an uptight personality. And I wasn't even particularly thinking about her when I was just goofing off, sending a fax, until I saw that she had posted a sign on her bulletin board that said in big bold letters, please do not fax anything up to, or please do not fax items from this bulletin board to the upstairs fax machine. Well, you know what I had to do, right? I took her sign that says, please don't fax, and I faxed it to the upstairs fax machine. And I think before this had happened, I think upstairs, or no, I don't remember where it was. There was some internal correspondence that I just happened to see. Because the fax machine upstairs was right beside the receptionist area, and I started seeing some of her scribbled notes. I think the lady downstairs, I think her name was Kathy, and she's like, Kathy, what in the heck are you doing? Basically blaming her for faxing these things upstairs, and poor Kathy, of course, she hadn't faxed a single thing up there. It was some bored accountant in the middle of the night doing it. And apparently it didn't put a timestamp on the faxes or whatever, but I never did go talk to Kathy or tell her what was going on. I just remember laughing myself sick when, after doing that, like the following night when I was in there working late again, the sign had flat out disappeared from the bulletin board. When I faxed that up there, it made the sign go away. And that sign was placed there for one person's eyes only. Although she didn't know who was doing this, it obviously was for my eyes only. And at that point, I quit doing it. It was funny to me, but I never told Kathy. I never went and confessed what I had done to her. Maybe I should have. She's probably long since retired. This has been many years ago. And maybe you all listening to this would say, why in the world, why would that seem funny? Like I say, it seemed like the thing to do at the time, and it was generally harmless. I know there's some pranks that get out of control, and there's property that gets harmed. There's people humiliated in front of other people. Hopefully none of that happened here um, to poor Kathy, but what can I say? When you're a board accountant, you look for things like this. Now, when I went from the Portland firm and came to work for my father, we had a wonderful lady who was our receptionist, and she was such a good sport. And there was a number of pranks played on her over the years. And oh, airplane, ring around the rosy here with this tractor. Come on, probably just slamming it into the tree. By all rights, I should probably just cut that tree down and be done with it. But then we wouldn't have the ambiance here now, would we? Even my father played a couple pranks on her that just got her. And she, like I say, she is such a dear. She was such a good sport about it. She did her own little jokes over time, too, to get some of us back. So it was good. We all took our fair share of abuse, if you will. But one thing my dad did to her one time is, this was back in the 90s. We had a president, Bill Clinton. That's what his name was. I think he was president 96 to, I think he was president for 8 years, to 2004. And so I came to work with my father around the year 2000, so he was still president. Well, most presidents share their tax returns with the public. They make them public. So anybody, anywhere can download a copy of them. And it had his full official name on it, had all his income and that kind of thing in there. That's just something that gets done typically. Well, most people in public knew him as Bill Clinton. That was the name of the president. But his official name, if you will, was William, and his middle name was Jefferson, I think, so William Jefferson Clinton. Well, in an accountant office, when we take on a new client to do their taxes, one of the things we always get from them is their prior year tax return. That's just part of something we get when we set up a new client. So my dad downloads the president's prior year tax return, and he hands it to our receptionist and tells her that this is a new client. So she goes to all this work setting up files or whatever for William Jefferson Clinton, and his wife was Hillary Rodham Clinton. It had her name on there too. They were married filing joint like everybody else. And it never clicked. My dad was thinking she would figure it out eventually, but she literally set up the whole file. And back in those days, we were 100% paper, so it was a bit more to do than now, where everything's in the computer. She set all this up and then sent it back to him so he could review it. I think she copied the return and everything, got it all set up like she could, and she was so mad when she learned she had been duped. And put this together for a president. We wouldn't do the president's return. I mean, he has highfalutin people, to handle his stuff. So we were able to pull that off. I tended to do things to her that were a little more just annoyance type stuff. I mean, she had this cupboard where she kept stacks of different types of envelopes. Well, I remember going to her cupboard and putting a strip of tape on the bottom envelope in each stack, and the other end of tape I would affix to the door, so that the next time she opened the cabinet, it would pull the entire works out, and all of her envelopes, would end up on the floor. Almost kind of a slapstick prank. There was another guy in our office. We traded a few things like that back and forth. I know one time for him on his computer, he unfortunately knew. Well, I think all of our passwords at the time were structured similarly, which is kind of a no-no. But I knew his password, and one morning early before he got to work, I knew it was going to be his birthday. So I went into his computer, and you know how, like, in Windows you can change sounds so that, like, every time you minimize a window or you maximize it or you open or close programs, I mean, you can have it do sounds, right? Or even when you log on to Windows, you can have it play some song or whatever as you get on. So I started putting all of this stuff on there. I looked up on the internet, oh, what was it? I'm a guy, right? So I looked up all these belching and flatulent sounds, farting and whatnot, and I put those on his computer for all these things. And somebody somewhere out there had used these sounds, and I don't know if it was a Mozart, Beethoven, one of the guys. It was a uh, classical uh, type thing that you would hear an orchestra play. Well, they had done all this with belches and gas. It was just hilarious. So I took that thing and I put it on his computer and had it play when he logged in. So in the morning, that would have been the very first thing that hit him, which it assuredly did. Then the other thing I did is I cranked his volume as loud as it would go, and hoped it didn't blow the speakers out of the room. And then I logged off, I think, and just kind of went over to my office and waited for the fireworks. And let me tell you, I wasn't disappointed. He thought it was pretty funny, actually. Of course, and whenever you do a prank like that, the right thing to do is to undo it. I don't think he knew how to undo it, so I went over to help take care of all that. Um, Another time for his, again on his birthday, in those days we would take people out to lunch for birthday. We've gotten a bit too large, it's hard to do that anymore. But I made up some excuse that I had to drive separately to the restaurant. So everybody went ahead and I stayed behind. And kind of in anticipation for his birthday, I had been manufacturing dots, with a 3-hole punch, the 2-hole punch, or whatever. And I say manufacturing not really deliberately. It's just the idea had come to me some time ago, and I just started saving them up. And I had thousands of the things. And when it was his birthday, I went and put this hopper on his door, and I rigged something up so that the next time I left the door partially ajar, kind of how he left it when he headed off to the restaurant with the others. But I rigged up this hopper so that when he opened the door in full, that the hopper would let loose and all these dots were up in the hopper and they would just fall all over the floor. Well, they indeed fell all over the floor. That wasn't the problem. The problem was is it did it while we were all gone. And it was just so funny. He was disappointed that it hadn't worked. Because, if it had worked, when he would have gone in there, it would have literally given him a shower of paper dots when he went in the room. So we were both kind of disappointed it didn't work. And then I spent probably a half hour on my hands and knees trying to track down every last one of those miserable dots to clean his floor up for him. So gotta do that when you pull the pranks. If you're gonna do it, be at least helpful to clean stuff up. Oh goodness, what's something else? Yeah, I think back on our receptionist, the one that we had before now. I think I had one of my uncles who's a prankster call her. I said, I want you to pretend you're a client and ask her if your work is done, his tax return or whatever. So he called up and just called her several times, and she was scurrying all over the office trying to figure out who this client was and who had his work. And of course, I think I maybe told my dad, I don't know. So he kind of was in on it, but nobody else knew who it was. So she was kind of just flustered looking for him until he finally confessed, he was just pranking her. I think I pranked my dad one time. We used to have a computer kind of in our library where we would do our tax research and what have you. it was in the days before you could get all that. You could log in somewhere on the internet and access it. Um, well, maybe they had it at that time. At least we didn't. We had it on CDs. So we always had to log into a special computer in order to access, these types of materials. Well, I had the ability, I don't know why, that I could, from my desk, my own desktop, I could log into our library computer. And it was pretty handy. If I wanted to go do some research, I didn't have to get off my duff and go over to the library to access a computer. I could just do it, from my own machine. Well, my dad didn't have that ability, so and the library computer was just kitty corner right outside my office door, so I could see at any time if someone was on it. I knew who was on there. Most of the time, I of course didn't pay attention. I was doing my own stuff. But one time he was on there, and one of the things that I discovered by accident, I think, is when I logged into the machine, even if someone else was there, I had control over the mouse. So my dad is sitting there. My dad is pretty technologically savvy, um, but but he couldn't explain this. He was trying to look something up, and I could see on the screen exactly what he was doing. And I would just move the mouse. You could see he was trying to click on something, but he couldn't get the doggone thing to go over there. And at one point over there, I think he tried to call someone else to see if they could get on the computer or whatever. And I think then what I would do is I would just leave it alone. So the other person was able to use it no problem. And then when my dad would get back on it, I would start messing with him again and moving the mouse in ways that, anyway, just kind of doing some good old-fashioned harassment. Kind of like oops, I didn't mean to open that up. Kind of like I mentioned somewhere else, it's kind of a dad's job to prank the kids. Maybe that was in the last video. So, you know what? The reason is that the kids give it back to the dad, and I guess I was giving it to my dad at that time. I think eventually he gave up in frustration. He came back to it later, and I left him alone at that time. But, oh, and what's another thing? I realize I'm getting way over my 30 minutes here. Our receptionist, you know how people will have desk toys, like a little stuffed animal or what have you. Well, she at one point went through the whole office, and this is part of why she was such a dear lady. I mean, I just loved it when she did stuff like this, because it was a very family type environment. And she just one day she decided that everybody needed a desk toy, and so she went and got one for us, and like a little Beanie Baby or that thing. And I don't know where mine went. It disappeared somewhere down the line, and I got a different one on there now. But just to have something at your computer or whatever. Well, so of course she got one also for herself. I think she called it Daisy. It was this duck or whatever she was interested in. Well, another one of my coworkers, I don't know what the deal was. Our receptionist was also responsible for stocking our supply room with snacks. We've always, as a firm, and we continue that to this day, we try to keep a full snack cabinet. We don't charge anything to our employees. That's just one of the benefits of working there. And we try to keep it stocked so people are happy. We put plenty of soda, pop, and stuff in there, various types of drinks, and all kinds of snacks. Well, anyway, she must have been a little bit late in attending to this particular employee that we had at the time, something that he wanted in the supply room. So he stole away Daisy Duck, and he left a ransom note. And it was just hilarious. He said something, if you ever want to see Daisy Duck alive again, you need to put such and such, I think it was, in the snack room by such and such time. Well, bless her heart, she played along with this, and she didn't give in to the demands. She couldn't figure out who was doing it. Maybe she did at some point, but she didn't buy the item that was requested. Well, eventually somebody found Daisy Duck, because, she was like, no, you need to return Daisy before I get, what you want. Well, he had taken the duck, the stuffed animal, and stuffed it in the freezer. So poor Daisy was frozen stiff, and there it was. So anyway, I've maybe gone on too long. I know I'm way over my half hour. I think I'm coming up here on 40 minutes, if anything. So maybe I'll terminate the episode there, but I'd really like to know what kind of pranks you maybe have pulled, and kind of what the outcome was. And maybe some of what I've described here seems tamer than what you would do, or not very exciting. Oh, what can I say? Accountants are boring people. But thank you so much for watching. I'll stop the episode here, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day in the meantime.